Now we're going to move on to the next panel session. We've got a slight lineup change in that Fatima Manji cannot be with us because she's reporting on the London Bridge attack, unfortunately. So that event has meant she can't join us. So I'm going to chair the panel, and we're going to be joined by three amazing women who are going to come up and discuss the themes we've already been talking about and take more questions from you. So I'd like to invite Yasmin Alibhai-Brown and Alison Phillips and also Ayesha back up here onto the panel so that we can have the next session. Thank you.
I'm so short.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm just going to give you a slightly fuller introduction. So Alison Phillips is editor at The Mirror, and is the first woman editor, I think, since 1903. Is that right? That's what Wikipedia told me anyway. And there was a woman in 1903 editing The Mirror.
Yes, the first ever editor of The Mirror was a woman.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. So I didn't know that until I looked it up. And then we've got Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, who's an author and journalist, and who's got a book coming out as well, which you can no doubt tell us about. And then, of course, we've got Ayesha, who you've already met, and she joined us because she's also an Evening Standard columnist, so I thought better to hear from her about what it's like being a woman on the front line of reporting on politics, and then I can do the interesting chairing role. So I suppose I just wanted to start off by having had that session. I thought it was a very honest and frank session. I think Ayesha's right to say Andrew was being very candid in that session, and we covered a lot of ground. But I just wanted to get the panelists' reflections on what she'd said, and also to think a little bit about, just your own experiences, really, of the themes and the issues we were talking about. I mean, Ayesha, you finished that session talking about your own experiences on social media. I know you talked about your mum, but I don't think it is just your mum trolling you. So I just can I come back to you first, just to kick that off, and then I'll hear from everyone. I just, tell us about what it is really like for you, and do you feel, that the comments that Amber made about her experiences and also the extent to which women should or shouldn't be encouraged, do you think that was about right, or do you think she's slightly not getting it right in terms of her judgment on how serious it is?
Well, I think she was obviously just reflecting on her own kind of experiences, but I do think it is very wearing on a lot of women in the public eye, whether they're MPs, whether they're prominent journalists as well. I think if you look at if a woman posts a political comment on social media or makes a sort of a strong political point, she will always get way, way more abuse than if a man made the same sort of comment. And of course, it isn't just a bit of debate on the comment that she has made on a particular political point. It gets to, you're useless, you're ridiculous, you have no legitimacy doing this position, you're fat, you're ugly, you're stupid, I would rape you, you're not ugly enough to be raped. It quickly veers into something which is like pretty frightening, to be honest. And I don't know how we put that kind of genie back in the bottle. I would love to be able to say to you, hey, here's the magic solution. I've spoken to a lot of people who've said, well, maybe if Twitter just banned certain accounts, or you had different filters, or you had different... I think, unfortunately, something has been unleashed in our kind of society. I think it was probably always there. I don't think that people stopped having nefarious thoughts or misogynistic thoughts or racist thoughts. But something has happened over the last few years, and I think Brexit is obviously part of it, but I think the social media is a big part of it as well. Social media has been good in one way because it has democratized politics, and anyone can get involved and be a participant and be a critic and a commentator, which is good. But it has also encouraged us to just shout and scream about politics. It's not about there's no nuance left anymore. And it's a system which rewards extremism. So the more extreme you are, you get rewarded for that with likes and retweets. And then to build on that, if you want to criticize somebody, it's not good enough just to say, oh, I don't agree with your opinion on X, Y, Z. You have to take it. It encourages this sort of kind of orgy of some quite violent language, violent imagery, really degrading. It's almost like you get rewarded for how can you completely dehumanize this woman who has had the temerity to have a political opinion? How can you frighten her, and how can you frighten others like her to make sure they don't make the mistake of opening their big mouth again? And I hate to say that because I feel very negative saying it, and I don't, as I said, I don't want to put off women from being in that space, but that is what it is like, to be honest.
Thank you. And Yasmin, just give us your reflections. I mean, obviously, you know, you've been in the game and in this business a long time, before social media was around. So what changes have you seen in terms of your professional experience?
Well, oh God, I look back with such fondness for those green pen letters that always were delivered on a Saturday, and the maximum were 12. And, you know, they were ranting and raving, but boy, those were the good old days. But in a way, I think, to pick up a thing that Ayesha has just said, it is about the public space. I really don't care whether you love me or hate me, whoever you are, but the public space has got to be a civil space. This social media has turned us into Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, they fear women in the public space in a physical way. They're making us fear the public space, females fear the public space in exactly that same way. They're telling us, you cannot be in this space. And I think it was Operation Blackfoot that a couple of years ago informed me that I was the second most abused woman in the country because I am a woman of colour, a migrant, outspoken, Muslim, and a Remainer. Apparently that combo... it's not good for a lot of these men. So how do I deal with it? I deal with it by never looking at the buggers. I just don't look. And that makes them really angry. So whenever yesterday I was having lunch in Liverpool at a really lovely restaurant. All I tweeted was, this is some of the best food I've ever eaten. Fuck off back where you came from. Why are you still here? So there's, honestly, that's all I said.
What were you eating?
Spanish food.
Spanish food.
European food. Anyway, so...
Remainer food.
I just think, what's wrong with you guys? And I made the mistake. It was a foolish thing I said because I never imagined it would happen in my lifetime. Remember when they said anybody but Boris, even the Tories? So I foolishly once said, if he's ever selected leader, I'm going to leave this country, thinking we're not that stupid, and we are that stupid. And so now every minute of every day, so now all I say, if I do bother, I'm just being like Boris. Boris made all these promises to you. I've just learned from our Prime Minister. But the thing is, really, as somebody said, do not engage in these conversations with them. Because they kind of sexually get off on it, I think, a bit. Really.
Yeah, no, I think they do.
Yeah.
I think they do.
That's good advice. Alison, so at the Mirror, you're there doing old-fashioned media, if you like. How does that cross over with the social media space? And what's your experience of being an editor at the top of the Mirror? Do you feel a bit lonely? And it's not Fleet Street anymore, is it? What is it these days?
Well, so the Mirror's interesting because although obviously we still have a print product every day, we're kind of read by about 7 million people online every day as well. So we are very much in that digital space. I think on that point about social media, I'm like you. I mean, I think this is the old-fashioned bit of me. I just don't look at it. I just think, and I think I always think like, it's almost like that classroom thing where you have a few naughty kids get all the attention and they're the bullies, and whereas like the vast majority of people in this country are decent, kind, courteous people. And unfortunately we've got into this position whereby the people who are vile are getting way too much attention for what they've got to say, and we have to find a way of keeping it in proportion and not giving them too much of that attention, because then the courteousness will overwhelm, and we've got to sort of get to that point. In terms of sort of the more traditional media, which I think, again, we need to remember is where the vast majority of people in this country still get their news from, across broadcast and print and digital. I think that was the thing that I wanted to say. I think we've got a huge job of work to be done around trying to reach a better gender balance. So I think, as you mentioned earlier, so the first ever editor of The Mirror was a woman in 1903. At that point, it was set up as a paper by women for women. I think they gave slightly less than 6 months.
And then it's called The Mirror.
Yeah, it actually was. They said because they wanted it to reflect the women's views. But they gave her less than 6 months, and then they sacked her, and they never let another woman have a go until last year when they gave it to me. So there's me. You've got Kath Viner at The Guardian. The new FT editor is a woman, which is interesting. Yeah. And The Sun on Sunday has a woman, but that's about it. So you could say, yeah, it's better than it has been in the past, but all in all, it's pretty rubbish. And I think there's a slightly larger problem as well in that you've got a lot of people in the key decision-making roles. The one executive down there, the people are deciding, right, which pictures are we use today, which stories are we going to use, which stories are we going to spike, which campaigns are we going to pursue. And that, I think, is where we're losing a lot of very talented women from the industry. And until we remedy that, we're not playing our part, I think, in the democracy. If you look at a well-functioning democracy, has a press which represents the masses and which speaks for the masses. But if we're still only representing and speaking for half of the masses, which a lot of titles essentially are, I think we're not upholding our end of the bargain.
No, it's very important. And the thing I think, you're right to say people still get their news mostly from conventional, traditional sources, but there's a big generational shift there, isn't there? So,
yeah. But they might be reading it on Facebook,
yeah,
or they might be reading it on, but where the news has actually originated from in this country still is essentially the established news brands.
But in terms of the attitude to social media, because I'm very conscious that, I'm a bit like you, I can just take it or leave it, to be honest. And if I have a couple of bad days on it, I just don't go on for a while, just to have a break. But for young women in particular,
it's hard.
The social media world and their sort of social spaces, online spaces, are far more fundamental to who they are and how they live their lives. And so I can see it with my own kids. Yeah. And so what do you think the solutions are for younger women? We're seeing a spike in self-harm amongst young girls, for example. 1 in 4 young people are addicted to their mobile phones. What do we do about that? That feels to me to be a big issue.
It's a very big issue, and traditional media is governed. It's a governed space. So if you're talking about broadcasting or talking about newspapers, it is governed. There are regulations, there are limits to what you can say. And however much I hate this person or that, the lawyers aren't going to let me write that. Simple. Good thing. These guys have got away with it by denying that they are publishers. And that can't go on. So I wrote my column this week because last week it was very interesting. Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of social media, Sacha Baron Cohen, and John Sweeney, all three came out with these very powerful statements on why the tech giants absolutely have to be tamed and made to take responsibility, because they're really, frankly, and this I would have taken Amber on, when she said that it's just not happening. No. And so it's they're deeply uncompetitive to the traditional media people who have to work that much harder to be fair, and at the same time they're exploiting vulnerable people into believing all manner of outrageous things, and nobody can stop them. So I think there's a very serious issue here, and our dearest Nick Clegg is not helping.
It's like an evergreen statement. Just like have that kind of alarm clock, Britain, hello. No, right. I just think it's very. I think there is a real generational divide on social media, and I think for so many, younger generation, they're what's known as digital peacocks. Their whole life is kind of social media. They sort of something hasn't actually happened unless it's been Instagrammed and filtered and everything like that. So I think it's very hard to, again, put that genie back in the bottle and just say, right, everybody needs to sort of stop kind of doing it. But there does need to be so much more kind of education around social media. I do think we will look back, who knows, maybe in like 60, 70 years' time, I think we'll look back at this particular moment in time as we did with the tobacco companies in terms of, at the time, everybody was like, oh, smoke all you like, it's really great for you. And same with social media, it's like, fill your boots. But I do think when the tests are done and the evaluation is done about the damage on your psychological, on our collective mental health, let's be honest, and also our individual sort of mental health, I think social media and this sort of thing might look quite different in the future once we have more of an understanding of how it affects us.
And in a way, that gives me some hope, because I think we'll get to a point where, as a society, we will start legislating much better around it. It's like when the factories were first introduced and no one really thought about pollution and sending children into these terrible situations. So that then you got the factory laws, and change will come. And I think we're still in the really early foothills of what this digital new world's going to look like. But we do need the legislators to kind of crank up their game and get on top of it, because at the moment the Silicon Valley companies are just running roughshod over the rest of us.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the thing, and the one thing that really is important, that they're bigger. These companies are bigger than any nation.
Yes.
So the only thing that is going to work is huge pan-national action by cooperative governments. The EU,
we're opting out.
Yeah, one of them we're opting out of. But like I argued with Nick Clegg, actually in the headquarters in Menlo Park, very near his $7 million house, when he was talking about it's up to government to regulate. And I said, you know as well as I do, single governments just don't have the power to stop this, or to at least not stop it. And I do agree with Ayesha, we mustn't forget, it has immense power to awaken democracies, to give voice to the voiceless, the frightened, all of that. But at the moment, the damage it's doing young girls. I mean, just yesterday I was in Liverpool talking about the rise of the far right. Most of, there are these young far right women who are very beautiful and blonde, and are using selfies to entice young people to the far right. And I was showing them this, and they were really appalled. And they said, why doesn't somebody do something about this? And the very young people in the audience. I said, that's exactly the point.
But I suppose I agree with everything about the big giants. I suppose the only counterpoint I would put a bit of grit in the oyster is that, nefarious means will always find a way of sort of coming through. So the point you make about those young girls, I completely agree, but that would exist if we didn't have social media with magazines or whatever. A lot of this comes back actually to all of us, but particularly leaders in any field, political leaders, business leaders, people with influence and a platform, sending a signal that this is not okay. And I think one of the reasons why things have just gone so Black Mirror recently is because we have a generation of political leaders that just don't care. They will say anything, they will do anything. Those lines are crossed again and again and again, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Nigel Farage, whether it's Boris Johnson, whether it's Jeremy Corbyn. We just have that again and again. And we aren't a society who are unbelievably deferential. However, the cues and the signals that our political leaders give are incredibly powerful in society. They send a message which says this is now permissible to do this and say this and articulate this. And I think the tech giants are really important, but there's a huge kind of civic society, and also all of us that have power through the newspaper, columns. I mean, some of the things that people write in columns now are just an absolute dog whistle to sort of, and people who, and it's not just the right, it's the left as well. Some of the worst pylons I get are from people with kind of gentler politics so we all have a responsibility. Yes, the tech giants are really, really important, but we all have to think before we send any tweet, or whether you're a leader or anything like that, is this, just take a step back. Are you going to be proud of these words in sort of a couple of years' time? Are you going to think about the consequences of what this signal sends to people? I think we all have to take much more responsibility.
I think you're right, and I think this is another point I would have liked to argue with Amber Rudd about, because when she says, oh, Boris is just more or less, saying all this, but give him the crown and then he'll be a nice liberal. Sorry, that is just like, marry me and I'll be really nice.
But that was, I did want to kind of come to the sort of political impact of this, because obviously we're seeing some really dodgy tactics being used at the moment. You know, I mean, some seriously sort of fake newsy kind of tactics. And it's almost like, you know, they're pushing the envelope, they're pushing the limits of what they can do during this election campaign. And by the time we've all kind of caught up with the fact it wasn't true, and, you know, and they've been wrapped over the knuckles for doing it, it's just too late, because it's had an impact already. And I think the whole sense of the whole regulatory framework, same with the Electoral Commission and what they can do in terms of regulating the way we run elections, it's all after the event. So it's what can we do about that? Well, ultimately, how do we get ahead of the curve on this? Because the damage is done.
I think, I mean, the thing the other night where the Conservative Party put out the Twitter full, like a fact-checking thing, for me, was one of the most shocking things I've ever seen in my life in British politics. I was astounded that could have happened. And that's the level of the danger. So I think the best thing we can do is make sure that as a nation, we are fully informed about what's going on, and we are angry about what's going on. We are motivated to make change. Now, you know, we've got a fantastic room full of people here, and I'm sure you're all, you know, well across all these issues that have been going on in recent weeks. My job as the editor of a tabloid paper that, you know, our readers tend to be maybe in manual work, they may not have a college education, and so I feel very strongly that I have a huge responsibility to make sure that ordinary people, the masses in this country, are properly informed about what's going on. Because we have got to ensure that the masses of this country remain informed about what's going on, not just people who've got an interest in politics or who are active in that field. Because it's only when we keep, as a whole nation, saying that this is not acceptable, we do not want to be hoodwinked, we cannot live under this tyranny of fake news, that we will actually be able to push back against the people in power.
And the other, I mean, it's really the fakery that established. I mean, I'm an immigrant, and the one thing, I've been very critical of this country, all sorts of reasons, but the one thing I totally admire, and I'm really grateful about living under it, or was its unwritten constitution, 1,000 years of creating a stable, secure, and largely uncorrupt system. None of that is true anymore. I mean, the civil service was really something. You go to India, people will tell you, the great British civil service, everything has been undermined and corrupted in the last 3-4 years. What will take its place should frighten all of us. Because once you aren't even, as a political party, doing an honest piece of, political campaigning, you are deliberately misinforming the voting public. When you're attacking the civil service, you're attacking the media, you're absolutely behaving in a Stalinist way that anybody who's not with us is the other and the enemy. We should all be standing, from left and right, be defending this system, which is being corrupted. And the Electoral Commission isn't fit for purpose. Sorry.
Most of our electoral laws are sort of 19th century laws, actually. We're operating a system that's completely defunct. Ayesha, can I just ask you a slightly different question, which is, I just want you to get your reflections on both what's happening at the BBC and Channel 4 at the moment. So we've had, the debate, the leaders' debate, where they put the ice blocks up. I have to say, I thought it was quite funny. And then we've also had, Boris Johnson refusing to appear on the Andrew Neil interview, and then now they're saying we're not going to put him up for Andrew Marr until he's done the Andrew Neil. So, there's clearly a massive tussle going on about this issue about balance and who's got the power and who's playing the system, who's going to win, and, what do we do about the kind of balance?
Well, I'm afraid Boris Johnson is winning at the moment in terms of the sort of game playing. So when I've worked on election campaigns before, I mean, TV debates they're a relatively recent thing. They've only really arrived on these shores since 2010, and of course we remember the famous "I agree with Nick" moment that sort of haunted them. Now that moment is actually very seminal. Nick Clegg has left a lot of damage in this country, but that debate was very, very seminal because, of course, you know, he sort of came out of the blue, and you know, everybody was like, "Wow, this guy's amazing," and got coalition government. So all political leaders and their strategists, and I was one of those strategists, are very, very wary of the sort of TV debates. If you go in as one of the big two, you have the most to lose. So there's a cold, hard strategy, which I'm just being honest with you about. And when you're in the heat of an election campaign and you're trying to win, you are going to push everything to the absolute sort of limit, because politics is a blood sport and you're trying to win this. And we now are in a situation where every time we have an election, which is about once every 18 months, we end up with the debates getting much more complicated, much more ridiculous. We end up having endless debates about debates. And I think the time has come to actually remove it from just the broadcasters and the whims of the politicians and their advisors. There should actually be an independent commission that statutorily sets what the debate frame is going to be. So it's not about politics. This is what is going to happen. Because whether you love them or hate them, they are an important part of the democratic process. To Alison's point, you know, millions of people do tune into them. People who are not everyday political geeks, they want to see a snapshot of the people that are pitching for that top job. It's actually quite useful for people. So I would argue very much in favour. I think the Electoral Commission has actually argued for this as well. The whole thing should be set up completely separately, even separate from Ofcom. There should be something which says in peacetime, before there's an election, there should be a cross-party agreement about, right, this is what the situation is going to be, so it avoids all this faffing around. But what kind of underneath all of that is, now again, I'm not saying this is just a new thing. I have been a sort of press person since 1997 as a sort of junior press officer in the civil service, and then, of course, moving over to be political in the Labour Party. Government ministers, politicians will always try and game the system with press. That is time immemorial. You know, propaganda is not a new thing. There will always be publications that certain parties will want to do things with, and you know, that is the way things have always been, and that is not going to change. It's naive to think that is going to change. But we have, I think, reached a level where there's so much of that going on at the moment, and politicians are actually, particularly our political leaders, are trying to evade proper scrutiny, which I'm afraid you really do only get from a broadcast interview, where you have a broadcaster who will go in without fear or favour. Now, that doesn't mean everyone wants to have a Paxman, John Humphreys, duff everybody up, because that actually doesn't, I think, elicit the most interesting interviews all the time. I do think Andrew Neil is a very, very skilled interviewer. I think Emma Barnett is a very, very skilled interviewer from that point of view. But Dorothy Byrne, who is the head of Channel 4 News, made some really interesting points at the Edinburgh Television Festival this year about how, if you look at the amount of time that leaders, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, gives to actual scrutiny, it's getting less and less and less. There aren't those big press conferences anymore. Often the interviews are done with a favoured interviewer. They're very, very truncated. Like Boris Johnson did an interview with Nick Ferrari yesterday on LBC. Now, I do stints on LBC. I do respect Nick Ferrari, but he's clearly got a very, very strong bias, which is pro-conservative. That does, I mean, it was a fairly decent interview, but that does not cut the mustard in terms of having an impartial. So our politicians have much more scrutiny. I mean, when I think back when I was growing up, which is many, 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 many decades ago, but I would remember on a Sunday, you know, the Brian Walden interview was a serious piece of journalism. And when I was researching my book, Punch and Judy Politics, available in all good bookstores, little plug there, which is all about the art of Prime Minister's questions. But when we were interviewing Thatcher's team, they were really interesting because they were saying, you know what, she didn't run away from big moments of scrutiny. She relished them. She thought, okay, if I'm the female Prime Minister and I want to look like I'm tough and I've got all these sexist men who are trying to sort of do me in my own party, and I'm trying to command the respect of the public, I should lean into these interviews. And she actually had a mantra, which was, and PMQs was twice a week at this point. She would do PMQs twice a week. She would do loads of press interviews, but she would always do the big Brian Walden interviews, because her view was it's incredibly important to show the public that you can be held to account. But we are losing that. And social media, again, is really distorting that, because both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are pumping out just propaganda. And that is reaching more people than our trusted narrators in terms of the broadcast media. So I think we're into quite a tricky sort of period in terms of broadcast propaganda. But like I say, one thing that would really, really help is to have it put, whether it's statute or however you do it, get the format sorted. So when an election is called, there is something that every leader signs up to, that they have to do these interviews.
But can I just say, the BBC missed a trick here. They should have got him into the Marr show and said, Andrew Marr has a sore throat. We've got the lovely other Andrew for you. Wouldn't that have been great?
Absolutely. Surprise! They should have brought out a big cake, and Andrew Neil should have jumped out the cake.
I'm going to come to the floor in a second for questions. I'm just going to come back for one more question from me, and then so have your questions ready. I wanted to just go back to the theme that we sort of started off with, really, and the kind of intersection of racism and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and misogyny, because it feels to me like this whole problem is much bigger and much more connected than perhaps we give credit for. And I think Amber Rudd kind of recognised it, but I'm not sure she really got it, to be honest, in her answers, and really understood that. And I was reading a really interesting article by Helen Lewis, actually. You remember Helen Lewis, who writes for The Atlantic now. She wrote it in August. It's all about the manosphere and how you've got these incel men, involuntary celibate, apparently that stands for.
Totally not, like in our Prime Minister's case.
Well, yes, but the point is they basically, this far-right hate and misogyny go hand in hand. That's basically the kind of narrative of these websites and the social media interaction that takes place, and that spills out into our kind of conventional social media platforms, and then onto our streets, and the kind of attacks on individuals that we've seen. So I just kind of wanted to get your reflections on that, really. And do you think that's kind of scaremongering? Do you think I'm overstating it, or do you think that's real and that threat is real?
I think we've got a lot of people who've made the calculation, and it's a deliberate calculation, that division is very useful for their political gain, and they will find that division every which way they can. And by othering other people, they deem that to be a successful point. And I think that's, unfortunately, it feels like it's a trend which is gathering ground. We're seeing it in the States, we're seeing it elsewhere across Europe. It's a global issue now. And I don't really know what the solution is. And you see this whole sort of rise in popularism. You see this whole confusion about people not knowing what to believe anymore. They don't know what to believe, and actually that's all that people need to succeed, is to cause so much bewilderment that people don't know what to believe in, and they can't work out the truth between fact and fiction.
It's about division.
It is about division, but it's also just bewildering people. So if you've got people that are so bewildered, they don't know who to believe in, and I think the whole area around identity politics, it's just fragmented us to such a degree that the people who succeed are the strong men who will rise to the top and say, oh, don't worry, I speak for everyone. I speak for everyone, whereas in actual fact there's never been everyone.
And I think that's absolutely right, but it's even more dangerous in that one of the best writers on who we are now and where we are in the United Kingdom is Fintan O'Toole. And he wrote a piece a few months ago saying this is what pre-fascism looks like. We are in a pre-fascist era. And the other thing that these very dishonourable leaders are doing, of all parties, and I have to say, for the first time ever in my life, I am so disappointed in our broadcasters, because they too are so scared of the popularity of social media that they're not challenging it, but they're following it. And there are people who are being featured on those programs who who are actually spreading propaganda unchallenged. But that's by the way. So the thing that the package is bigger than what you said. You're right. There's a package. So it's anti-immigrant, it's anti-black people, it's anti-Muslim, very definitely anti-Muslim. Some are also anti-Semitic, or they can be, those are anti-Semitic or anti-Muslim or whatever. They're anti-women, they're anti-gay, they're anti-social democracy. They're anti-democracy. And then the strong man leader. This is all being done now before our very eyes. So what was the point of winning the war if you're letting this happen in a country which prides itself on never having allowed itself to slide into Nazism? So these are important questions.
I mean, I would sort of agree with a lot of that. And one of the things that I'm really conscious of in broadcast, I actually wrote a show about it last year called Girl on Girl, and it was about how the media loves to pitch women against each other, particularly on feminism issues. So they pick the most bonkers thing about feminism. They get two of the most bonkers women they can possibly find, and it's like, fight, 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 fight. And it's like really kind of, and I think they do that with other things as well, because I think Yasmin's right. The desire for that moment that goes viral in terms of like two people having a horrific kind of really toilet level sort of punch up is the sort of goal now, rather than informed opinion. That's really, really corrosive, very corrosive. But I think taking a step back, it's very, very hard to see how you suddenly turn this around quickly, because the reason populism works is because the clue is in the title. It's really popular. It's a sugar rush of everything that you've believed, everything you feel that nobody has allowed you to say, whether you're on the hard left or the hard right, is loads of easy solutions, the panacea to all your problems. Why wouldn't you love that? Why wouldn't you love that? Particularly after you've had a thin gruel of years and years of people telling you that actually there's not enough money for this and you can't do this and everything's going to be really hard for you. And I think one of the reasons why populism is rising on both the left and the right is because of the failure of sort of centrist, moderate politics as well. We see it in America. The Democrats completely collapsed. I think they're still in quite a lot of disarray. And I think you sort of have it here as well, massively. You see it across across Western Europe as well. And I think until we have a countervailing force to this, which people believe and is appealing to people, that says, I know the Liberal Democrats are trying to do that at the moment, but let's be honest, it's not exactly kind of working particularly well. There isn't a kind of credible, moral alternative which is honest with people, but still is something which has a vision, which does appeal to people. At the moment, it does feel like it's a sort of race to the absolute bottom in terms of say what you like, promise what you like, spend what you... just lie to people constantly. And of course, when either side is elected, what that will yield is disappointment and more chaos and more kind of... We have a kind of really difficult politics right now where both left and right feast on division, and they feast on, this kind of despair that everybody is sort of having. And I do think we are so crying out for a kind of not in a sort of centrist, boring, let's go back to everything being the same in terms of the economic status quo and everything. But we need something new that is going to come and counter this extremism on both the left and the right. But it has to be a product of its time. I'm not saying let's mawkishly kind of slave over the sort of memory of Tony Blair or something like that. We have to create something which is of its time. I mean, I look at someone like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, and you think, wow, that is amazing kind of leadership. And if we had somebody like that, and if there was somebody that was kind of, that would be radical. I mean, that would be something which would be appealing and new, but it feels like that is a bit of a way off. And I think we also have to have a situation where, I think to your point, Alice, is really, really important. We're all very politically aware. We're very driven by our values of feminism, hence why we have gathered in this place on a Saturday morning. There's a lot of people out there who are not driven by those things. They're not political geeks. They don't it's not that they don't care about things. We have to find a way of communicating with those people in a way which is not finger wagging, it's not shouting at people, it's not saying that they are thick, stupid, racist, bad, sexist, terrible sort of people. It's understanding, to quote the Joel Cox thing, we do have more in common, and I think the majority of people in this country are decent, they are tolerant, they do not want to have a society which is riven in division, which we have now. They don't want racism, they don't want misogyny, they want a place where their daughters and granddaughters can thrive like their sons and their grandsons as well. But we have to find a way of finding that common ground, and I think that is what is really missing in politics right now.
Can I just make one point? I mean, how can I say this? I think there is much more racism today than there was in the people we were in 2012, which was amazing, wasn't it? That year of our Olympics, that was when it felt bloody brilliant to be British. All the research is showing that there is a marked increase in racist attitudes and actions and actually a lot of misogyny too. So I think two things need to be done. It's not the left and the right, but the extremists on the left and the right.
But they're dominating.
They're dominating. That's what
That's
we need to get the good people on the right and the good people on the left to kind of find a way of back again.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
I mean, I didn't agree with everything that Amber Rudd said, but when you have people like Amber Rudd leaving the Conservative Party, that is a worry for all of us. Even if you are a staunch Labour person, you should be worried about that, you know?
And I take them on. I mean, when people are racist, I take them on. The person at the railway station told me, it's all the fault of immigrants. And I said, actually, no, I didn't. I wasn't there pushing austerity policies onto you. You're poor, you're on benefits. I've been paying taxes since 1975. I love it that you're getting some of my taxes. So in what sense am I your problem? In what sense am I your problem?
Okay, look, I'm going to come to the audience now because you've been very patient waiting for your chance to come in. I've got a hand here. Now, you can shout out, or we do have a microphone here for those who prefer to use the microphone. So, woman here, and then I'm going to come to Liz at the end. Yeah. Okay, carry on. I'll repeat the question. Yeah. Okay. So how do we regulate the sort of more irresponsible media that are misleading people, including the mainstream media? You're talking about the Mail and Sun and so on. Okay, let's take another question. Liz, come on.
Isn't it about time we had a form of proportional representation in this country?
Yeah, if only.
Okay, PR. Interestingly, Amber Rudd's come out backing PR recently. I saw in her standard interview. But I'm going to come over here. Hand up. Yeah, person at the back. You can use a microphone if you prefer. Okay. Okay, so the motive of hate crime against women over the last 100 years. Who wants to pick up that first? Alison, should we come to you first? But what about the Mail and all your rivals, basically? Should we regulate them and not you?
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty. I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't like things that Mirror writes as well, which is, I guess there's a difference. So the established news brands in this country are governed by IPSO, which is our regulatory board. And also, if it's something that's factually wrong, we would have to make corrections. Or, if it's really, really bad, I can go to prison. So, which sometimes I think would be a blessed relief in many ways. But anyway, I think we have to hold them to account. Anybody anyone across our industry who's not behaving properly has to be held to account. But I think I probably would say this, but I honestly don't think. I'll tell you what, there's things I read in the Daily Mail every single day that I absolutely abhor. But I will always defend people's right to say it, because I think then you get into the freedom of speech. If it's not unkind and hurtful and cruel. But so I think that's difficult. I think where it goes into a slightly different area is when you have people publishing things where they're not governed by ipso or they're not governed by the law, and so then they really can be saying anything. Like, I think we need to look around political advertising as well on social media channels, because again, that's a slightly different remit. We may not agree with a lot of things that the Sun and the Mail write, but I think as long as they're not breaking any laws and they're not breaking any regulatory things, then they obviously have to have a right to say that. But I think we have to look at the people who are saying things without any regulation around them.
Very good. And what about this question about PR? Who wants to pick that up?
Well, I just want to pick up something on the regulation stuff, because we went through, when I was working for Ed Miliband, we had the Leveson inquiry, which was looking into press standards. And it is very, very difficult. I mean, I think, so IPSO is the son of the Press Complaints Commission. And it's an improvement, but I still think there is a way to go, because it is still essentially the press marking its own homework on things. It isn't completely independent. And one thing that I think would make a massive, massive difference, I do share Alison's concerns about freedom of the press, and certainly the campaigners we were working for wanted the state, they wanted like MPs to have a bit more of a say over the governing of the press. And I think you can all agree right now that when you look at who's coming into Parliament, that would be a thoroughly, thoroughly bad thing. But one simple thing that I think would make a massive difference to press regulation is if you have to make a correction, the correction should be the size of the original offending article. Because quite often a front page will appear or a page lead, and then the apology will be in the hidden away on the bottom of sort of page 2 or something.
Positioning of corrections now. So if it's a page 1 mistake, there has to be a page 1 correction. So we're getting better.
Things like the Daily Mail and stuff, you still, or the Sun, or even more reputable things like the Times have really had some crackingly bad stuff, particularly in Muslim covering of. There was a case about a child that got put in to care with like Muslim parents. It was completely distorted and wrong, and there was not a fulsome sort of apology. So I do think we we need a free press more than anything now, but the press also, and I say this as somebody who works in a newspaper now, and I love it. I've gone so native, I like completely sort of love it. But, you know, we have a responsibility for our own kind of futures. On PR, absolutely. I think PR is incredibly important. And actually, when I interviewed Amber for the Evening Standard, she said that she had changed her mind. Now, we have to go in eyes wide open to PR. It could well be that if you get PR, you're going to get some MPs that you might not like the parties. However, I think that's democracy. And however, the problem is with the big two parties still, why are they going to do it? Because it advantages them. But I absolutely do agree. I think the time is right for change.
One of the things before, I can't even remember, I'm so old now, but there was a time when groups could also complain to about press treatment. So if asylum seekers, if they, there was group denigration, and that was quite an important thing, because it's one thing if an individual complains and gets, like this case with the Muslim foster parent, the whole tenor of that thing was, oh no, Muslim foster parents, dangerous, somehow brainwashed children, all of that. We should be thinking about this, because I really am a journalist, but I do not believe in a total freedom of speech and total freedom of press. That way lies chaos. That's what's happening online. We see what happens when people are so incontinent with their words and thoughts. And it's how we work out that balance. There's a wonderful line in Coriolanus, this big, tough soldier who says, I took the blows but fled from words. Words really hurt,
What about this point that was made? It's always been like this. Women were targeted 100 years ago. What's different? I used to work for Bernie Grant, back in Tottenham, and he was one of the first back MPs. He got a lot of hate mail. He was a hate figure. He had the Daily Mail going through his bins, to find stuff on him. But he didn't have social media to put up with. And I just want, to what extent is it just as always as it as ever has been?
Well, I think misogyny against women is not a new thing, sadly, new breaking. But I think what's different about it now is, first of all, social media makes it very, very easy to do it. But I think what a lot of men have deep anxiety about is that women are slowly beginning to acquire more power. The acquisition of power is becoming more gendered, not as fast as we would all like it in this room, but it is. And that absolutely terrifies a lot of these very, very, very angry men. And also, not just men, there's very traditional angry women. I mean, we shouldn't assume that, every single woman. I mean, Amber made a fair point about, everyone judges their feminism differently, or what it is, just because you're a woman, should you see the world a certain way. But I think one of the things I read that was really interesting, when I did a little bit of work for CNN, and we were doing some research into when Hillary Clinton stood. And for many people, there was some really interesting sort of poll that was out. And for so many people in America, not just men, by the way, women as well, the thought of a woman standing was so egregious. It was like a sort of coach and horses being driven through every value that they held dear about family, about community, about power, and how that was organized. And it was incredible about how it was almost like a sort of, they weren't just angry because she was standing and they hated everything about her in terms of what she stood for. It was like she was attacking the foundations of society, which is ordered in a certain way. And I think that's another thing that drives so much of an angry response. Now, I think they get angry if it's any woman, whatever political hue they're in, but you throw in, as Yasmin saying, being somebody from the left and being an ethnic minority. I mean, when I have done things like, when I've entered a space which is incredibly, I've entered a lot of male spaces, stand-up comedy, the Labour Party, even the world of sort of political commentating. It's pretty, but I've done some shifts on LBC, which is such a male, and I've really enjoyed doing them. But my God, the abuse I get, even guys at the station who monitor the socials were like, wow, this is off the scale. And it was almost like, how dare you? And I once did this phone in about Meghan Markle and whether the press and the way she was being treated was racist. And I got this one guy who rang up and he was so angry. He was like screaming down the phone. And I just really quietly said to him, why do you hate this woman so much? What is it about this woman? And he went, it ain't just her I hate, it's you! Obviously that was my dad, but but you were like, wow, and you could feel this kind of unfettered rage about how dare somebody like me occupy this space, how dare somebody like Meghan Markle come into the absolute pinnacle of established order in this society. So this rage is very deep and it's very real.
No, and it's something that, similarly, I was having an argument. I'm always having arguments. This guy said, how dare you say this country is racist? I said, I never said this country is racist, but I do say a very large proportion of people in this country do not accept people like me. You fucking Paki, how dare you say that? You're not even British, so...
Right, I'm going to come back for some more questions. Hands up, okay. There's a woman in the middle here, and then I'll come to the front. Yep.
I live in 6 countries, and what strikes me is that we are here talking to fix democracy. Maybe it's nothing to fix. Maybe there is, democracy was invented by the Greeks, and they were male that were nobles. They were the ones that had the power and made the rules. And we've been, spending 2,000 years to try to make it work. And to your point, Yasmin, we are really in a pre-fascist place, because I lived in Venezuela. So, this is common. But I also live in Quebec, in Canada, where women were able to overturn the power of the Catholic Church to have in their lives, in the social sphere. So I would really like to know, what are your ideas that is not democracy? Is there anything there, or we just have to go with the tools of the master?
Right, so basically this is just essentially democracy, and that's take it or leave it. that the question? Okay, woman at the front.
Yes, doesn't the BBC have a lot to answer for all of this? They've been daily sexist for the last 20 years. We get sexism. They have 20 years of targets to get more women behind and they've done nothing about that. Harry Gracie, the gender pay gap is shocking. Why has nobody in the BBC lost their jobs about this? And why are we struggling to pay their license? And they've caused the rise of so much social media because people have realised to get to them.
Okay, so it's the BBC's fault. All right, next question over here. There's a back at the back. Yeah, I can't see you very well, but carry on.
What can we do to gain more coverage of women's issues in the media? And when we do get that coverage, what can we do to make sure it's fair, balanced, objective? Because quite often women are misrepresented and people almost patronise and talk down to the papers or
Yeah. Yeah, the point about women's issues in the media and getting fair and balanced coverage of it. I mean, just going back to what Ayesha said earlier on about, being asked to, one woman being put up against another. I do often get requests for interviews like that, and I just always turn them down. I just never do those. I just think I'm not going to go into that space. I don't need to. Forget it. We don't. And I know a lot of other women, and Sophie Walker and others have all said the same. Right. So who wants to talk about democracy, the BBC, and just one thing? I'm a bit concerned about the BBC. For a number of reasons, and we've all got our concerns, but I'm worried about this sort of erosion of confidence in them in the licence fee, basically, because I think we're on a bit of a downward spiral, and if we lose that, then actually we're going to narrow the consumption of some of that BBC content. So although they've got their faults, and we've got £361,000 of their money, thanks to Carrie Gracie, I am a bit worried about what's going to happen next with the licence fee.
I would really echo that. I do agree with you. The BBC has not covered itself in glory, but no organisation is ever going to be like 100% sort of perfect. But I mean, the gender pay stuff, also the BME pay gap is unbelievable in terms of it's so rare to see, black and Asian talent, really flourish at the BBC. Look at what happened with Naga Manchetti sort of recently, absolutely, and Samira and everything like that. So I do take that point. However, we will really regret losing the BBC if we don't at some point kind of stick up for it as well, because you go to any other country, and particularly America. I mean, my political colleagues in America would love to have something like the BBC. Yes, it is completely imperfect, but it is some kind of trusted narrator on the big issues of the day, and that is a very, very important thing to have in a sort of democracy. So I do get your point. I mean, I think the BBC, a bit like we're talking about sometimes with newspapers, can be its own worst enemy in terms of how it sort of conducts itself. I remember when George Entwistle, he was Director General of the BBC for like 23 minutes, and he famously said, "Where are the older women? Where are they? Where are they?" And it's like, George, they're right in front of you. You just fire them as soon as they get a grey hair, basically. So, I think there's huge cultural things that do need to shift in the BBC. And I think the way to sort of deal with the BBC is to remember, if there is a Conservative government as well, one of the things they have said openly on the record is that they are going to try and kill the BBC. Yeah. They're going to try and diminish the licence fee. So I think as guardians of the BBC, as critical friends of the BBC, we should advocate the existence of the BBC and the continuation of the BBC, but we should also be incredibly vocal about the many, many things that the BBC gets wrong.
I was going to say exactly the same thing about the BBC. I know at the moment it feels to me there's a real growing anti-BBC thing going on the left and on the right, which feels a bit uncomfortable to me. I completely, all their pay gap stuff, and they've been very slow to reform in many ways. However, you imagine this country without the BBC as we would have as in the States, and I think it would do this country so much damage without it. And I think to the point about democracy as well, and I think I'm sort of slightly repeating myself from earlier. I mean, there's that great Hannah Arendt quote where she said, the perfect person that you need for totalitarianism isn't an extreme fascist or an extreme communist. It's somebody who is unable to no longer see between fact and fiction, true and false. And I think whilst we've got a BBC that is still somewhere in the middle ground, we have to hold on to it. And then on the point about what can we do about getting women's issues in the media, I think what we really need to do as an industry, I'm involved in women's journalism, as in Yasmin, we need to get more women in the bigger positions. I mean, we've got a gender pay gap, which is bad in the media. I work for Reach PLC, I think ours is about 15%. You go on something like The Economist, you're up to 22%. We've got to, because until you have women, not just as editors, but in all those senior positions, and you reach that tipping point where you've got enough women making those decisions, I honestly don't believe we are going to, it's a subject close to my heart, so we do a lot of things in the Mirror, but that's just one paper out of very many different media outlets. So we need bright women going all the way and making sure that we make up the change.
With the BBC, I think what I would have said has been said. The democracy point is an interesting one. We have to fight for it. We have to feminize democracy. And we have to value those women, and there are internationally some incredible women leaders. You know, Rwanda has more women in parliament than we do. I think that should make us all weep. And some of them are astonishing. If you look at Rwanda, they have, and it's the women who led this, women politicians and others, who reabsorbed those savage boy soldiers who carried out the massacres only 20-something years ago. They have been reabsorbed into the communities. Women did that, and because they were more than half the MPs in their parliament. So we can reform. I think democracy is the least worst system, but it will take time. It'll be your generation, I say this to the younger women, who will make it really be what it could have been for a long time. But I lived in an undemocratic world till I was 23 years old. I lived under the British Empire. People forget. There was no democracy in the British Empire, and there was no freedom of speech neither. I remember being thrown out for not standing up for God Save the Queen during a Charlie Chaplin film. So 23 years old before I come to a democracy. And it's incredibly valuable. And as for women in the media, I mean, what, you haven't read about uplifting bras this week? It's what we read about. It's what we want to read about, apparently. But yeah, change, not just numbers, but treating us as adults. Treating women as adults would be nice, wouldn't it?
So just on the democracy point, I completely agree with what Yasmin said. Yes, it's completely imperfect right now, but it's the only thing we've got. But the other thing is, if we are going to defeat what we don't like, it's not going to be done through outrage on social media. It's going to be done at the ballot box. And the big thing we should learn from what we were one series in with Donald Trump in America, you know, you can howl on social media about how angry you are about everything, but until we, you know, have leaders that people want to vote for, like one of the great tragedies about where our election is now is that I think a lot of people are very, very, very dismayed with the prospect of a Conservative majority, but they don't feel there is anyone else that they can vote for either. And so that we have to get better at doing politics as well. So that's how we want to make democracy better. On the women's issues, this is a really, really good point. And I, you know, try and write about women's issues where I can. In fact, I got a letter of complaint into the Evening Standard going, why do you let this woman bang on about being a brown woman? It's so boring. From a white man who, in fact, he was kind of quite a red-faced man, actually, to be honest. No, George Osborne's very good about this stuff. He's like, write more about it. He's actually a rare person who's given me a job in the media. It's like, very, very odd. But one of the things I think a lot of, I don't take this as being kind of critical, but I'm just going to be really, really honest. There are so many huge things still facing women. Violence against women, lack of women's representation, women's parlour economic situation, the pay gap, the care gap, you know, you name it, right? Yet what really bugs me senseless is when the issue of the day, which some feminist out there has promulgated, is something completely ludicrous and quite frankly bonkers. Like, I'm going to have a huge row over the fact that there's something called man-sized tissues. Like, I don't give a shit about man-sized tissues being called man-sized tissues. I don't really give a shit about the fact that there are signs, like, you know, sometimes you go to the supermarket, there's a thing that's saying men at work in terms of, like, really, yeah, in when we've sorted everything out, I'm happy, but that is like so much at the top. There's so many basic things, and in fact, we've had this conversation at the Fawcett Society. I mean, I've said to Sam, I don't want Sam, as a brilliant leader at the Fawcett Society, to get down and dirty on some ludicrous kind of tabloid TV show, having a completely pathetic fight about something, some small aspect of feminism that really, really is not what the big issue is. There's so much big stuff that is not happening. In fact, there's so many things we're going backwards on. So I think we have to keep getting these issues in the media, and we've got to keep fighting for them, but they have to be serious. They should not be like funny, haha, quirky, crazy things. They have to have bags of research behind them. We have to have good evidence. We have to have new evidence, and we have to have really good, credible spokespeople that know their stuff out here, because when media people try and put women's issues on, it is to have a laugh, genuinely. It's to try and kind of say that we're all a bit bonkers, we're all a bit ridiculous, we don't understand really what's going on. I mean, my God, the number of debates I have to do saying that there is no gender pay gap and it's like a figment of my imagination, just makes me want to like scream into the void. So we have to, I think, be much sharper and much more ruthless about the sort of media hits we seek to get as well.
And we have to be aware of when we're being played on that point where they want two women to come on and have a fight, and it's fine to say no, it's fine, I don't want to do that. That's absolutely fine.
I mean, somebody asked me to go and have a fight with Esther Ranson. Who has a fight with Esther Ranson? I mean, how can you have a fight with Childline, for God's sake? I mean, you can never get through for a start. I mean, it's just like, you know, it's just ludicrous. Just say no.
Right, thank you. Yasmin had to go because she had to go and do a Sky interview. I'm really sorry that she had to leave early, and I know we'll show your appreciation of her when we finish the session. I'm going to take one more round of questions, then we're going to come to a close. Right, woman here, yes. Shout a bit more. Okay, so use the power of the ballot box, and how do we use the power of the ballot box? Not that we're going to tell you how to vote, because obviously we won't do that here at a Fawcett Society event, because that would be completely wrong. Yes?
How do we make the general public realise when we talk about women's issues, they're actually everyone's issues? So take this example of economics. There's so many studies already that in businesses, if you have diversity, and it's not just women's issues, it's ethnic minorities, but the more diverse businesses are, the more successful. How do we, what's your advice or your thoughts on how we make these standards relevant to everybody?
Okay, women's issues, everyone's issues. Another question over here. Yep, at the front.
My question is about the Good Parliament report that came out about 5 years ago, and it was just a question really saying, is it a good report? Were there good things in it? And if there were, bearing in mind that the culture and the ethos of a company or anything else, and certainly this country starts from the top, can we have a campaign or a lobby to actually get the new Parliament to take on board what was in the Good Parliament guide?
Okay. And it is a good report, by the way. Sarah Charles did a brilliant job. Right, I'm going to take two more, just because it's the last round, then we're going to finish. So at the back there, and then over there, yeah. You'll have to shout again. Ooh, sexist rhetoric on mental health. Right, last question.
Okay, I happen to be the model for the statue of Emily Rising Dix.
Oh,
Amazing.
My question is, I'm sure, like everyone else here, quite depressed by a lot of what we've heard this morning. And that's where I seem to spend my life at the moment. However, I'm 69. What was one thing in your lives that has improved, that you would say has improved?
Oh, that's a nice question to end on. Lovely. Okay. I've got a few things.
So many things to get through. Okay, a very important question about, look, I do understand that a lot of people are feeling incredibly despairing about this election. It's a sort of, it's an election that nobody actually wanted. It's like that third child, let's be absolutely honest. She's got 4, it's fine. So I actually don't have any children, so I can get away with that joke without like anyone like. But it's very, very, very hard. It does feel like, as my taxi driver last night said to me, it's like, you know, it's who do you like, who do you hate the sort of least, really. It's very, very difficult. But what I would say is, even though it's very despairing, first of all, make sure you vote. Secondly, make sure everybody you know like goes out to vote, because a lot of people register to vote and then just never ever get round to doing it. Look, there's a whole range of sort of things I could say to you, like there's tactical voting. I think if you are in a marginal seat, I think it is worthwhile looking at some of the tactical voting sites. I would look at a couple of them because there is slightly conflicting evidence. And that could make a material difference, to be honest. And if you are in a marginal, it may well be that you want to vote for a certain party, but if they're really, really kind of, you know, not got a chance, then I think you have to use your judgment. But what is important is that you do use your judgment. I think a lot of people are just relying, they're going on one tactical voting site and sort of almost outsourcing the decision. And I'm afraid you can't really, really do that. You have to look at everything in the round. And yes, you have to look at it slightly tactically. And this election is tough because it's quite a lot of this election is not so much who do you really want, it's who do you really not want as well. That's a really important thing. So I'm sorry there's not an easy answer, but it's just so important to make sure you get into the ballot box. What were the other things as well?
What's improved?
What's improved? Well, I would actually say that I think representation has improved. So when I was growing up, I really, really wanted to have a job in politics and the media, and my mum said there's absolutely no chance of that happening because you're this sort of Muslim brown girl from Glasgow. That just does not happen to people like us. And actually one of the things, and I'm really, really proud to have worked for her, is that I think the work that Harriet Harman has done over the decades has heralded in more people in Parliament. I think that really, really didn't just change the sort of face of Parliament, but it changed the kinds of people that was in there, the issues that were being talked about. I mean, when I started off my kind of career in 1997, if you said that you were serious about women's issues or equality issues, you were just like laughed out the room. Yeah. And then in 2005, I became the sort of special advisor for women and equality issues, and we delivered the Equality Act, which is something I'm incredibly sort of proud of. I mean, obviously we've still got a long way to go. So I do think things I've still got a long way to go, but they have got better on that front. What was the other thing?
There was women's issues or everybody's issues.
And mental health.
Mental health is really, really important. I think one of the things that we haven't quite talked about is on social media, like if you, but also the sexism point as well. If you are the subject of misogynistic abuse, whether it's at work or online or whatever, it does actually take a toll on your mental health. And I think the work that the Young Women's Trust have done on this is brilliant, because no one has really made this link and nobody has talked about it. And it's actually one of the reasons why women who are brave enough to put their head above the parapet, make a complaint at work, take a tribunal, they almost have like a sort of double mental health pressure. They have the mental health trauma of the discrimination they faced, and then they have the mental health trauma of trying to right that wrong and being judged and being accused of, not being honest and all of that kind of stuff. So I do think that is I think that's like a new front to really explore, which is the sort of cost of misogyny and sexism, because it does dent your confidence. And as any woman in this room knows, one of the reasons why it's so hard to speak out about it is that as soon as you do, in every walk of life, we mentioned about the Parliament thing, one of the reasons why so many women and young men have not spoken out about sexual harassment, about bullying, about discrimination, is the fact that they're worried about being shunned, about being stigmatized, about having a black name a black mark against their name, about not ever being sort of promoted, and that puts a huge amount of mental health. On your point, I think we have got to get Parliament to change that. I'm a big fan of Lindsay Hoyle. I'm obviously disappointed that Harriet Harman didn't win, but I think she is going to continue to be a really, really important voice in Parliament. And I think one of the things we should all do with our new, fresh Parliament that comes in is let's make reform of Parliament like really, really high up on the agenda. Let's lobby everybody, and let's not make this party political either. I think the key to sort of changing Parliament is to make people of all political hues feel that they have skin in the game and that they should own this project. And actually, it's a great project. If you think about all the despair that's coming down the track with Brexit and everything else, a lot of MPs, particularly new MPs, will be looking for something positive to do, something positive, which is slightly bigger and above the fray of quite nasty, divisive party politics. So I think this could be an opportunity for us and others to sort of make that case.
Alison, last word, very quickly.
I think on the point about how you keep democracy alive, I think we have to sort of think beyond just this next election as well, and look at how on a grassroots level what we can all do and we can all put back into society to ensure that there is positive things coming upwards rather than just sort of some of the negativity that we're seeing coming downwards. And on a final thing, how things have improved, I think, only 2 years ago we had the Me Too movement. I think so much came out of that. So many people felt empowered to speak about things that they hadn't previously, that sometimes we can get caught up in the negativity and the difficulties, of which there are many, but there are many, many positives. I know that sort of women who work with me are no way treated in the way that I was treated when I was starting out in my career. So there are positives. We have to focus on those positives, and we have to use those to give us the energy to never, ever stop fighting for further change.
Brilliant. What a lovely message to end on. Okay, because of my bad chairing, we're overrunning, so I'm going to be very, very brief. My positive is maternity leave. When I had my first two children, the eldest of whom is 28, I had 18 weeks maternity leave. Most of it was unpaid. It was pretty awful. When I had my last two, I had 9 months of paid maternity leave and much, much stronger, much higher pay and just much more support, actually. So I think it was a transformational system by the time I had those second two. And I think on the point about women's issues and our everyone's issues, the mainstream issues, it's really, really important, and we always make that case. And I think we're in that double bind sometimes. We want to argue for women's issues, but actually childcare is an economic issue. The unpaid work that women do is a central economic issue. So you're right, absolutely, we've got to keep making that case. Can I just invite you all to thank our panellists, including Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, for a fantastic session. Ayesha, Alison, and Yasmin. Can I invite everyone who is not a member of the Fawcett Society to please join the Fawcett Society today, otherwise you will not be allowed to leave the building. No, we need your money, basically. Please support our work. And can I also say to every member who's here, you are invited back into this room at 12:30 for the AGM to start. There is lunch going to be served outside. You can bring your food and drink in here. You don't have to sit out there. So you can bring it in here so we can start promptly at 12:30. We've got another fantastic session coming up, including Dame Laura Cox, DBE, who is just a wonderful, wonderful woman. You'll hear from her. So thank you all very much. Enjoy your lunch.